Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I'm your host, Scott Ramp, here to usher you into March 13th, another Friday the 13th. We got one a whole month ago in February. We're getting one tonight. Roxy Theater is showing Jason Goes to Hell at 8 p.m. tonight at the Roxy Theater. We got a lot of things happening this weekend. We got the St. Patrick's Day Parade. MCAT will be a part of that as well, which will be stepping off at 12 noon. Just as the snow will probably start really melting, if it hasn't already melted by this afternoon. I'm just using my old winter photo from back when, just to kind of show some of the contrast. And you know, this morning we have the pretty much the first. Maybe the snow that will kind of last a couple days or not, depending. It's been a lot warmer, and Tuesday temperature is looking to get into the mid-60s. So whatever snow is falling today, it's going to be having to deal with an earlier spring than we would have anticipated. But regardless, we have yet another short one this week. With the UDC has gotten me padded out for city council for quite some time, and I'm definitely starved for content. But the city has two proclamations. One is Women's Month, in honor of the female leaders and influential women that we've had in America and the world. Also March for Meals, which is for the Meals on Wheels program. This also launches Missoula Aging Services campaign to help those for staying homebound and staying in their homes. Missoula Aging Services connects people to this service that has been around for since basically the incarnation of the EPA. So Dean Thompson, Missoula Aging Services driver, talks about the Meals on Wheels program a little bit more. And here he is.
Any given day, we're serving some 315 people, active clients in Missoula County. And this helps people maintain their independence in their home, older adults, and it also reduces the cost of health care, and ultimately throughout the time people are on Meals on Wheels. We could not do it without the more than 120 volunteers that we have. Ted has been with us for 25 years, a quarter of a century, and it's just the man is there. He's got the same energy now as when I first met him almost 14 years ago. And we couldn't do it without somebody like Ted, who oftentimes is the only person somebody sees in the day. So that's the reason the program works. We thank you for the March for Meals proclamation. And I'd just like to thank Ted publicly for all he's done for us throughout the years. Thank you.
Okay. And to sign up for the Meals on Wheels program, you can go to MissoulaAgingServices.org. They are a great program, and proclamations are common, and I want to give these folks another shout out. Cassie Trippard, Community Planning, talks about UDC's transition into code reform. Here's how they will update the permitting process moving forward with developers looking to get into the permitting aspect before they go into construction and groundbreaking.
With the new code, a new citywide zoning map was adopted as well. The code is accompanied by an updated standards and specifications manual that dictates design requirements for infrastructure, and all of this became effective last week on March 4th. The new Unified Development Code replaces the previous zoning codes, subdivision regulations, and most of Title 12. There is a transition period that lasts until July 2nd. During the transition period, people can apply either under the new code or under the old regulations that were in place right before adoption of the new code. In order to get a project in under the previous regulations, applications must be submitted in complete form by July 2nd. You don't need to get approval by the state, just need to get an application into us. This transition period applies to building permits, zoning compliance permits, design excellence approvals, subdivision exemptions, and conditional uses. Subdivisions are not subject to the transition period and will follow the regulations in place at the time the application is deemed sufficient.
Okay, so one prime example is townhouses. When there's the old school way of development code and stuff like that, the last few vestiges of townhouse exemption development, which is otherwise known as the former TEDS, not to be confused with the county attempt to use targeted economic development districts, which is for bolstering out the infrastructure by essentially putting a pre-made special improvement district in that area for all the new housing development. So in this case, this is more or less about just initializing kind of more of those kind of standards with adding more infrastructure for most upcoming or new development, housing projects, you name it. So it doesn't always have to be housing. It can also be businesses and other things related to building buildings in general. So as we go on, the process is changing, and the only really affects developers and folks looking to get approval for upcoming projects, small and large. Overall, this is supposed to make it easier for folks to apply for these permits, and so far when they were transitional periods, so a lot of the housing that already have been approved, they don't have to adhere to this, because this whole point of permits and transitional periods is to have this what's called grandfathered in, which is why we have a lot of these different mixed-use type programs in place. So Piper Gorse, a high schooler, gave public comment and kind of like decried that the city should adhere more to a clean and livable climate.
I love Missoula, and I'm lucky to call this place home. I love the fact that we have such a strong community that focuses on improving the world around us. However, pesticides on our parks and public lands don't match those values. Our public lands are sprayed with fossil fuel-based fertilizers and toxic chemicals, allowing these toxins to enter our bodies. The science is clear on why this matters, especially for people my age. According to UC Davis, endocrine disruptors found in many pesticides pose significant health risks. A major 2024 scientific review in the journal Neurotoxicology found extensive research linking pesticides and endocrine disruptors to neurodevelopmental disorders. Not only that, but the chemical components of pesticides can increase the risk of life-threatening cancers like leukemia and malignant tumors by 18.7%. The researchers concluded that because these disorders and diseases are linked to environmental factors, preventative actions are urgently needed. I love spending time outside, going on long walks and swimming in the Clark Fork. Access to nature has literally saved my life, healed my brain, and made me a better human. I shouldn't have to worry that the ground beneath me is treated by pesticides known to interfere with my health, both physical and mental.
Okay, so there's a public comment there, and to kind of tack on to her, because Parks and Rec have been using herbicide at McCormick Park, and from what the new Parks and Rec director Yoshika Marina Yoshika, grassroots have seen a deeper rooted system in their overall other pesticide used most lawns. She wants safe spaces to make sure all parks are pesticide free overall. And since we're on the subject of city lands, let's jump into more public comment from Suzette Dussault. She talks a little bit more about the housing priorities and how city money should be going towards more affordable housing. And she's been decrying this for quite some time too as well.
The county has produced a document in 2022 which was called Breaking Ground. It's a significant study of the housing needs. The top priority for those surveyed said increase the supply of housing affordable to all income levels. And that was 68% of our population. Improve existing infrastructure to support that, 41%. A lack of affordable housing was one of the most significant challenges by 90% of our community. So we all know this. So this is nothing of a surprise. So I'm thinking this is such a huge opportunity. Please keep this in your mind. Keep this in consideration. My little postage stamp house of 600 square feet has $100,000 value on the land it sits on. So if we just simply take one neighborhood, that's almost $1 million.
And part of that has to do with the fact that the city should continue what they do with the North Side Rivara project, where the city owns the land and basically takes care of the funding when it comes to any kind of land purchases, and relies on the purchase of the house before the land is essentially bequeathed to the people who successfully pay off their housing. This is also one of those more experimental programs that are first of its kind because it used to the new system. And I've explained this many times before, but they wanted to, the whole desire of the county and the city is to create more housing. And Suzette's problem is with how the city is going about doing this, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because public lands are being used to leverage affordable housing elsewhere rather than using the existing parcel to leverage affordable housing. Technically they are, but keeping ownership of the land, especially in times of economic uncertainty, should not easily slip away because there is only little leverage that people can use to get loans and liens on properties. Asset Management 101, if a billionaire's company is worth billions, they can get bigger loans from banking systems. That's just kind of how, you have the perceived value versus the actual value. And land always appreciates in value. So if the city owns more land, they can essentially create a leased land use potentially for the future. But at the same time, this is all speculation because the markets in the 2020s were a lot more different when they purchased the Northside Scott Street project versus what they're doing today, which it looks like property reassessments are making way, which kind of had little patterns and little things kind of coming up with the Fox Triangle Hotel site, where they are breaking ground and they're saying that they're going to be raising $8 million just from the land sale itself to the Doubletree Hotel Management Company that is building their new conference/hotel center. So anyways, like I said, land always appreciates value. It's the same thing with MCPS. They were also dealing with some land sales and stuff like that. A lot of the residents were just like, we shouldn't be just selling off these lands all willy-nilly just so we can pad out temporary things for the budget to maybe last a year or two. So just something to think about moving forward. But otherwise than that, we're talking about the committee meetings now. Climate Conservation and Parks talks about the rescind of the Parks and Recreation Design Manual. This is the 2018 edition, so they're updating it. And this is about putting PROST, which is the major update with Parks and Rec, including trails and open green spaces. This is also meant to incorporate parks and future development to enhance green spaces and to have parks within a 15-minute walk within any city resident in Missoula. Zach Covington, Open Space Land Management, talks about open space. And so this is some of their outright priorities to what they want to move forward. And here's just a little bit of background about open space bond money.
Each of these bonds were a little bit different. They started out fairly basic with protecting some of our larger mountains, visible mountains, view sheds, river corridors, etc., and land along the river. And they've expanded a little bit of the scope to also include things like non-personnel transaction costs, initial site cleanup, and now even land improvements on lands designated as open space. I won't go through all these project lists, but there are lists in the presentation and in the report of all the projects done through each open space bond. And that took a little bit of digging and a little bit of detective work, but it's been exciting to get that all compiled in one place.
And of course, he went through the list of all the properties that Open Space has gone through. I'm not going to go through it with you guys as well. And so part of this also has to mean that it means that they spent all the money generated from the bond of 2006 as they move forward to calculate their funds, which is roughly $7.5 million allocated to preserving open space for backcountry recreation, nature conservation, and for wild population that lives besides us. This is also a county bond, so the county had the other half. So this was a $15 million ask in 2018, and that's the budget that they're dealing with. And also, Zach also talks about the sunsetting of the 2006 open space bond as they are now moving more towards the only city bond that exists right now, which is the 2018 open space bond.
Been expended. So trails bucket at $2.25 million. You'll notice we haven't touched that yet, and that's been intentional over the last. I guess we're in our 8th year. And we've really discussed a lot about the Milwaukee Trail Corridor, particularly west of the Clark Fork River, crossing the Clark Fork River and going west up to Mullen Road. And as you may remember, the city is part of a 6-county coalition for a RAISE grant that was awarded to plan the Milwaukee Trail as part of the Great American Rail Trail in western Montana. And that particular site between Grove Street across the river up to Mullen is actually slated to be planned to 30% design as part of that process. And so that RAISE grant was actually signed by Federal Highway Administration a few weeks ago, which is really exciting. And that's a multi-million-dollar planning grant for Western Montana for that corridor.
And it's going to be a pretty big deal because, with the amount of money that was used for the, if you haven't already know this in some history, the Tiger Grant, which is a really old school grant from way back when, was used to incorporate a important 20-year project that essentially created a trail that connected Missoula all the way to Hamilton. So, you see that overpass on Reserve Street. That is also a major part to connect the Bitterroot Trail with what would be considered the main trail that would go off into that Hamilton area. Milwaukee Trail, which is, of course, the former railroad track that goes across it. They're also trying to expand it a little bit more, like you said, the Mullen connectivity, just to connect to Mullen Road. So that's a big part of this moving forward is connectivity. And, even a lot of stuff on the Reserve Street side of things, as dangerous as Reserve Street is, they're just trying to find ways to improve the corridor for bike and pedestrians to be able to get access in and around the city of Missoula as a whole, even and beyond. And aside from buying properties, open space gains properties through easements, which properties can convert their lands for conservation. Zach talks a little bit about Ten Spoon Winery, which was gifted to the city of Missoula, and many of the other ways that people have revitalized what open space means in the community.
Ten Spoon Vineyard and Winery, 21.5 acres. If you remember, a conservation easement was donated, and open space bond funds were utilized just for due diligence costs. Value of the donated conservation easement was $3.2 million. Really substantial donation. Marshall Mountain, of course, utilized $1 million of city administered open space bond funds and $1 million of county administered bond funds. Other leveraged funds were $2.9 million, 480 acres protected. And you've all probably been up there, but it's wildlife habitat, viewshed, riparian areas, and lots of recreational trails and access. A huge partnership, huge multi-year project. And I had to throw a picture of the Beastie Boys who were there up in 1987 on there for you.
All right, as we go back to my notes, these are the kind of lands that tend to have, Beastie Boys besides the point. These are the areas where Missoula utilizes space that keep them in the public eye for access and protection of wildlife. City of Missoula saw this opportunity to buy this land, even though it was technically in the county, because most of what the city buys with the open space bond money is those fringes to basically help preserve a lot of that land for natural use, access, trails, and just basic connectivity, so people are not stuck with being only allowed on private drives to go from place to place. Missoula kind of has that unlock when it comes to more public open space for anybody and everybody to have access to all these kind of beautiful places. And they've been doing it since the 80s. This isn't just some 2018 last minute bond of request, but Zach also responds to questions about the land near the airport. So that's some additional land that they're looking into to see whether or not they want to consider purchasing some additional land, especially in those areas which tend to be a little bit more marshy in that case. So here's Zach talking a little bit more about that.
There is some private property around there that could eventually be developed, and I believe a lot of that's in the county, so it would be based on county zoning. We don't know exactly what could happen up there in that respect, but the corridor itself is pretty encumbered by a lot of different easements and a lot of utilities and things like that. And so we would potentially have a really good deal. It's estimated to be about $100,000 for 28 acres, which is a screaming deal. But it could be developed further north, potentially, some of that land. The land to the south is Ranch Club, a golf course, and subdivision. And there's a lot of residents, a lot of people that live there. And of course, we're looking at how that corridor would serve that community, but we're also looking at how to connect to Mullen Road and eventually get people in those neighborhoods connected all the way to downtown through the Milwaukee Trail.
All right, so yeah, there's a lot of goals, and that's just part of the open space jam, trying to figure all that out. These are the kind of lands that tend to be more marsh and wetland, but provides potential for future development from the Y, Mullen, and George Elmer areas. Open space in the city tends to be far and few in between, and the county overlooks vast amounts of land in the county with their chunks of change from the bond to create more pathways for open space. So Zach talks about the synergy between the city and the county, and talks a little bit about some of the struggles and some of the successes they've had in the past.
There's not a lot of guidance in the interlocal agreement for staff to make the decision, and it's largely placed on staff to make a recommendation on that to council, and then council, of course, makes the decision, and the commissioners. But there's not a lot of guidance in detail on how to do that, and that may be something to consider for the next interlocal agreement if there's another future bond.
Yep, so that's just something to really think about moving forward, is that, the city and county seem like they are on the same page most of the time, but most of the communication is they got their own government parts to worry about overall. And it's a great example was Marshall Mountain, which the city used their funds to purchase open space outside city limits. City county have seen eye to eye on many things from major land use plan from the state and how we do zoning overall. But other than that, we also have housing redevelopment and community planning, which they're talking about a lot of those programs for homeless veterans. Dylan Barbash, community planning and for the Built for Zero team, talks about the city's housing for veterans.
Missoula will achieve functional zero for veterans by November 11th, 2026. I have this hanging up behind my head every single day at work. This is what I strive for. This is what I'm trying to push for. I like to have it as a reminder every day, just because that is our goal as a community, and that is what we're working towards. So I mentioned earlier that I'm here on behalf of the Built for Zero Improvement Team. The Built for Zero Improvement Team is made up of Veteran Affairs, Volunteers of America. We have 2 Volunteers of America staff in the audience with us today, so I thank them for being here. It's made up of Veterans Inc., Poverello Center, City of Missoula, Missoula Housing Authority, and United Way of Missoula County. Our goal is to address system-wide changes, improve processes, and move Missoula towards getting closer to functional zero for veterans.
Okay, and so they use the word functional zero quite a bit, and the whole concept of that is the idea that nothing will truly ever be zero, but having a functional zero where if they know of somebody who is a veteran who is homeless, they'll be able to have a placement for them. And with new veteran housing being built by Yoke's Grocery Store and the current Poverello Center, HUD has been instrumental in providing things like the Valor House, Missoula Housing Authority, Veterans Get to Work program that sets aside funds to help exit and thrive in public housing. This program has been in place since 2022. Successes include ramping up the placement for, Valor House hasn't been around since 2022. It's been around for a long time. But this particular program, Built for Zero, has been around since 2022. The whole housing sprint, place called home, all that kind of stuff was all an amalgamation of moving these programs and connecting all the right people to the right places. And in this case, since 2022, ramping up the placement of folks went from 2 to 3 people per month to about 5 to 7 people per month, resulting in a 49% overall in reduction. So in Missoula, there's 96 homeless vets and 47 being housed up to this current update. Dylan also talks about the pathways a homeless vet took with Missoula's program, which include housing sprint from 2024 housing season. So take notes. This is a great example of where you guys can learn how to point veterans in the right direction to get the kind of housing that they need.
We had a veteran about 1.5 years ago now. He lost his housing in Seattle. He got priced out of his apartment. His brother was living in Missoula, and he wanted to be closer to family. He also had some medical issues that he was dealing with, but he decided to head to Missoula and be closer to his family. He ended up landing in Housing Montana Heroes. That is the grant per diem program at the Poverello Center that the VA funds for them. And so at Housing Montana Heroes, he received case management. He received some time just to work on medical issues, work on getting a job, work on next steps to get into housing. From there, we were able to, during the housing sprint, I called around to a lot of different property management companies And I was able to get United Way of Missoula County, which is our fiduciary, agree to sign a lease. And, we kept hearing about, units not being available for the clients that we work with. And I said, well, let's try to just get those units off the market. And we were able to hold 4 units during that housing sprint. And this veteran applied to one of those units and ended up getting accepted into one of those units. From there, after he applied, the veteran was working with Volunteers of America. So Volunteers of America can help provide a deposit, can help provide a move-in kit, and kind of get an individual set up and ready to be into the unit. After that, the veteran also got support from the VA. He had a permanent supportive housing voucher, a HUD-VASH voucher, so Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing Voucher, that was able to provide most of the rent, and he was responsible for basically 30% of whatever his income was at the time.
All right. So yeah, 30% of income, and many of the questions that get tossed around back and forth was, at the end of the presentation, Dylan was asked about covering for homeless vets who don't have jobs. So what if they're just homeless? And not to mention, it's like, when you're homeless, it's hard to get a job, but it's easier to have a job than to get into a place if you're homeless without a job. So there's a lot of like back and forth where it's like, if you can't get a place without a job, and most people that don't have a place don't have a job. So here are some of the HUD-VASH programs that helps with this.
It's covering everything. And also, I will say the nice thing with HUD-VASH, right? It comes with case management, not just to get somebody into housing while they're in housing. It is it's a necessary touch point you have to have with your case manager. So we're also hearing a lot about these individuals that got a HUD-VASH voucher. Once they get into a unit, we're constantly hearing about what issues might be coming up. What do we need to be aware of so that we can prevent them from falling into homelessness again? So, HUD-VASH does operate a little bit differently in the sense it is a dedicated case manager. I'm not exactly sure how Section 8 works, but I know that at least with HUD-VASH, it's only 30% of your income is required, and if you're zero income, you don't have to pay anything.
All right, so that's something to really think about. HUD-VASH, HUD, Missoula Housing Authority, many of these other organizations like United Way of Missoula has been instrumental in preventing houselessness, but these are the kind of programs that get you out of homelessness in the end. But other than that, some bids for public works and land use planning, we're looking at to appoint folks for the City Commission and wireless communication system off Garrett Street here in Missoula. But regardless of that, those are many of the programs in place, and that's pretty much it for my city council this morning. And up next, we got some new programs on MCAT for you guys. Definitely a little bit more emphasis on some of the forestry, and of course that roadless rule we've been hearing about that MCAT has been covering at various locations. We just did one this week in Hamilton earlier, but before that we also had one that we did here at the Missoula Public Library. MCAT does a lot of these shoots here and around the community. We got one that's coming out of the Missoula Art Museum, many other these talking points, and even heck, we have Superintendent Micah Hill being featured in one of our programs as well from MCPS. So without further ado, here are any of the programs on MCAT, and when I come back, we're going to talk about some movies.
There's a lot of kind of like words that we use that are kind of, they mean the same thing, but they're different. So like Chippewa, Ojibwe, even when I say like residential, boarding school, and I'll do it probably a few more times during this talk. But that was actually like on a talk that another Little Shaw artist was doing. He's pretty famous. His name was Chris Latre. He was over in Helena doing a talk at the Montana Playwrights Network, and he was talking about birds, how a lot of them carry like the songs and the stories of our people, and especially the goldfinch was actually the language carrier of like the Anishinaabe. So one thing is like I really want to illustrate that. So if you see there's like the people on each side and the birds kind of going in between both of them, and same with like right there, they're kind of like more praising the bird. But why like the bird is so like important to me, and why you'll see it a lot in my work, is draw them a lot. Like I have like a connection with them. And it wasn't until like I heard Chris's talk, like how it all kind of like connected with myself.
There's the fire station at South and Reserve. Yes.
So that's in part of the rural then? Because I'm not seeing it on.
Yes. So that is Rural Station 1.
Okay.
But we have an agreement for that area that's right around there. If we have a medical emergency or a first due fire, we still send our resources, but they will respond to citizen need, even if it's in the city right there. And much like we do the same thing, there are places up Miller Creek or different places where we can get there faster initially, and then we'll all rally to that location. Yes, but that is not a city fire station. And there's some process of them potentially moving that station based on some growth stuff. But yeah.
When I talk to other area superintendents, say at like Hellgate Elementary, Target Range, Bonner, Clinton, all the schools that feed into us, they're also seeing declining enrollment. That live birth rate is really having an impact on us. We thought we were going to see a COVID bubble. Everybody was cooped up together. We thought maybe we were making some babies, but it turns out we're not. In Missoula, what compounds that is the affordability. So we used to be able to look at and say our high school numbers would grow where our elementary would either remain relatively flat or grow just a little bit. As prices got more expensive in town, people would push out, especially younger people. And so you think by the time my child was 16, maybe I'm further along in my career, I'm making a little more money, we're no longer paying $20,000 a year for childcare, those kind of things. Now we can afford a house in Missoula. But now, go to Lolo, go to Bonner, go to those other communities. It's just as expensive there as it is here.
These are decisions made by individuals. And they're made by individuals for a variety of reasons. I'll go into those a little bit. What we found in our interviews with several of those that we've worked with over the years is that when you ask them about why it is they are still out there on those places, their whole countenance changes. You can see them smiling and about what their experience is and how they think about the places that they see in one day and out the next. It's very special, and I'm not sure they would all characterize their decisions in this way, but my observation of them is that these are acts of reciprocity, giving back of what's been given to them over the years.
Hey guys, we're back. Let's talk about some movies that are coming out this weekend. It's time for Pre-Critic, where I judge movies based on absolutely nothing more than just the movies that have already come out, and movies like this are just going to be continuation of more of the same. So, reminders of him. The only perfect man for women out there is either dead or dying. Modern romances be like that, and most times as Wuthering Heights walks so Bridgerton can fly, and frankly this is similar to all those grounded love tales about losing love and finding that it has been in front of you the whole time. Hallmark movies have big city girls, and mainstream movies go with similar vibes but go dark with this lady fresh out of prison looking to connect with her kid who doesn't want anything to do with her, but the local bartender will solve all her problems. Probably Hunky and most likely the love interest in this one. And then we got Undertone, which basically is the idea of like podcasters meet real horror. Watch as podcasters get their just desserts, rehashing past killers, past and current hauntings, only to get pulled into a deadly game of, you probably should have stopped short of Wikipedia when talking about the topic of discussion. Podcasters, if you're going to go into a haunted place, you can't just like, I'm going to record audio and this is going to capture everything. And now that we got video, it's like, I get it, but at the same time, I guess, podcasts don't really require visuals, but yeah, I guess it just requires a pretty good storytelling process, and this doesn't seem like it. But here's yet another poster that very reminds me of pretty much the same as Undertone, but it's called The Gates. When you have a poster that's red and ominous and a picture of a movie called The Gate, you probably assume it's kind of like they're preventing the gates of hell from opening. But if you go on a road trip with friends expecting to have a good time, but someone suggests going to a place no normal person would actually go, you probably get a horror movie. These are the two friends look to rekindle their friendship over the summer between college and adult life, and you want to go into the last hurrah, you probably are in a horror film. As most horror films teach us, don't go outside and stop living in haunted houses despite the price point. If your life can easily be thrown away because your character is supposed to be hated, then you're in a horror film. If bad guy is personal growth through the film, then you probably got a Stephen King shuffle. But those are the movies that are coming out this weekend. I hope you guys enjoy them because none of these movies are being advertised as heavily as Project Hail Mary. If you haven't already seen any of those ads that everyone's getting excited for. Oh, thank God I have a video coming up because here's the 1965 sexploitation film Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. Here's my new dubbing stuff for you guys.
Hold on there a second. Hold on. I'm a-coming. Hey, hold up a second. I gotta tell you something.
My daddy never told me to talk to a stranger in a trench coat. Oh, by the way, where'd you get the trench coat anyways? Creepers Anonymous? Totally burned you good, boy. Now what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, they sell trench coats at the Golden Corral, but I don't need to explain anything to you.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you could have bought yourself some class with the amount of money you spent on that trench coat. I bet that collar and tie is just that.
Well, how about an old-fashioned kidnapping? I'm gonna take you with me.
What, a kidnapping in front of everyone that's here?
I'll just tell them that you're my wife.
No, uggos.
Oh, look! Over there! It's my one-handed wife. She's being accosted by some man. Ooh, he's wearing a trench coat on another level. But she's served. How is he gonna handle her? With all our combat training.
Secret technique. Purse.
Alright, I get it. You're hitting me. I think it's about time that you come with me. Nah, she's coming with me.
Boys. Relax.
You know what? I don't need you. Oh. What? Oh. Alright, everyone, let's get in the car. Nothing to see here.
Can you give me a hand?
That's enough, my dear. That's really funny, but we're gonna have to replace your hand at some point. That was a really nice hand. It looked really real and everything. Well, I managed to pick up your purse. You got it notarized and everything. Sweet. This is awesome. This is gonna make our marriage so much easier. So now when I die, you won't get any of my money. This is great news for me. All these certificates, I'm glad you got them notarized for me. I can't wait to inherit all your money, sir. Thank you. You're not getting jack. What? Pay no mind to him, my dear. You can be well taken care of, I promise you.
What exactly is a prenup anyways? Nuptial means marriage, and pre means before.
Well, yeah, sometimes. When you go into a marriage contract, you have to sign some paperwork, and a prenup is just all the paperwork made beforehand.
That part made sense.
Yeah, but it says that you will inherit half of everything? What part of a prenup don't you understand?
I gotta tell you something. I got a lawyer.
But how is this possible? I was playing the rich guy so well.
I have one hand, not half a brain.
Well, the joke's on you. I'm not actually a rich guy. I just own a gas station.
That's where cars live.
I inherit the gas station. Everybody wants the gas station. Maybe if you stop drinking the petroleum.
Welcome back. Let's talk about some news and things that are happening in and around the world. Senate GOP candidate Christy Jacobson is looking down a subpoena for her use of state funds to circulate images of herself and President Donald Trump here in the state of Montana. With the 467,000 postcards worth $197,000 were mailed to every Montana, with only citizens should be allowed to vote. Quote, in clear message to continue the rhetoric of the 2020 election was stolen and the future elections will be handled by the current administration so they remain fair for the 2026 midterms. This meeting was with the SAVA committee, first since Jacobson, a Republican, filed her candidacy for Montana U.S. to Western District House seat after Zinke bowed out of this election at last minute. The Office of Security Secretary of State usually has a representative at committee meetings to answer questions about elections, but were on the agenda. She did not attend because of personal family matter of a birth that was happening in the family. She followed up with a memorandum to the committee touching on several subjects that have drawn lawmakers' questions. The legislators on a 11-member bipartisan SAVA committee didn't consider it responsive to their questions. The Oversight Committee reviews 8 states agency, all of which report in person to the committee. According to the Montana Free Press, a public records request produced a months-long exchange between the U.S. Department of Justice and Montana Secretary of State about the DOJ's request for state voter information. DOJ requested the state's full voter file complete with driver's license numbers and the last 4 digits of registered voters' social security numbers in December 9th, 2025. Email to the DOJ, Jacobson's office stated that they had fully satisfied the DOJ's request. So your voter information has been delivered to the DOJ. Luckily, the Montana state constitution heavily favors open meeting laws, making information publicly available easier access to account unless a judge orders documents sealed in an ongoing investigation, which is being spearheaded by the DOJ under Pam Bondi looking into election. There are signs that elections are being targeted through the voter private information, which not only violates Montana's state constitution on privacy, but the 15th Amendment that covers the right to citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. However, as we must look into these amendments, to the only time our Constitution went for adding and removing something was prohibition, which was during the Gilded Age. But regardless of that, while elections are ramping up for 2026, public lands and roadless rule is impacting public lands. So the 2001 roadless rule, area conservation rule, protects roughly 6.4 million acres of national forest lands in Montana by limiting road construction and commercial timber harvesting. While this policy protects key watershed wildlife habitats, grizzly, elk, so on, and recreational areas, the USDA has initiated steps to rescind the rule, which actions taken in 2025. Proponents of the rule emphasize its role in conservation, while the federal government argues it impedes forest management. And so far, this was a big part of this because they did polling, and about over 99% of people wanted to keep the roadless rule in place. The argument on the current administration is looking to revitalize the mining industry to combat China and other companies America has outsourced. The sad reality is that while in America we have protections in place, we tend to ignore those bigger international markets that don't hold the same values of natural land and water features. In June, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins announced that she would be rescinding it of the 2001 roadless rule, which had prevented road building on 58.5 million acres of remote Forest Service lands. During the public comment period in September, 656,000 people commented, and more than 99% opposed the rule's repeal, according to the Center for Washington Priorities analysts of around a third of the comments. So far, many Montana senators got together to especially stave off these land sales, and new land lease agreements came into the works. So instead of selling off these lands, they figured out, why don't we just lease these lands for these mining companies to do it in lieu of? So the federal bottom line is to open the door for essentially AI centers, as the main bubble of the economy rests on the success of artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of big pictures happening here, and here in little Montana, a lot of times our Constitution is definitely ironclad is protecting us, which is why we should be very weary about this think tank that is trying to open the door for potential constitutional changes in 2030. In a meeting, Rollins said that she wanted to eliminate the roadless rule to build more roads to, among other things, reduce wildlife risk and help fight fires. Birchfield called those reactions tenuous, because people are cause around 75 to 85% of wildfire starts, so building new roads increases the risk of wildfires. And frankly, Montana doesn't grow trees fast enough to even have a logging company, because most of the trees that get harvested, it would probably take 20, 40 years for those trees to regrow, unlike places like in Washington, Oregon, which has tree farms, and not to mention the moisture that provides more of it. So not to mention, if we were to do a logging company, we'd have to do it close to the rivers, which definitely utilizes 80% of the water supply here in Missoula, and probably a big chunk of it in a lot of the eastern parts of Montana that get very little rain or, heck, even snow. The snowpack MCAT has covered this meeting, and you can watch the Realist Roll and these gatherings that have been happening here in the library and in Hamilton. And, it's all on our YouTube page at MCAT TV Missoula. And so with nearly 36 seats uncontested, Montana Democrats are rising again to perform 118 out of the 125 state House seats running up for election this year for the 2027 legislature. And for the first time in decades, the Montana Dems are branching out of Missoula and other urban centers in Montana. Montana Public Radio followed this story that took place in the Mansfield Metcalf Dinner in Helena, that the party is focused on grassroots efforts to bring new voters, and last session saw 11 Dems win over seats after the property taxes skyrocketed after homes were reevaluated to see a 40 to 60% increases in their value, and their taxable value as well followed suit. So it's only too bad the Dems are gaining ground as a response to the GOP rather than stand on their own laurels. I'm just saying, sadly, our system is about fighting against the other side and not fighting for something. And despite a lot of these efforts in the U.S. Senate and Western Congressional seat, the eastern portion of Montana remains highly mute in efforts to convince the highlands and the majority of rural Montana to vote Democratic, as the focus is on the western U.S. district. So good luck, but Missoulians tend to be treated like the annoying little sister of Montana towns and cities. So we are also seeing some of the more Republican hardliners looking to replace the more moderate GOP in those areas, especially in Cascade County in the Great Falls area, is looking to dethrone many of those moderate GOP members. And Montana Free Press have reported that the filing deadlines for the 2026 election closed last week, teeing up the contested Republican primaries for Cascade County open Senate seats. So the race gives Cascade County voters a chance to choose between two factions of the Montana Republican Party, a division that has manifested the 2025 legislature when moderates compromised with Democrats and undermined the more conservative legislators, which isn't anything new considering the U.S. congressional seats and Dane's U.S. seat closed out their primary with their own personal picks to take the last minute primary, making it hard for any grassroots conservative efforts to kind of contest. So part of this is, if we're speaking about the government, and a lot of different things going on with that, it's one of those things that really kind of can rub people the wrong way when you quit just in time to let somebody else that you picked to take up and file in, because when you do it at the last hour and last minute, nobody else can file. So essentially, you want to keep your own Republicans rather than the Republican as a whole. So it's like you can be a Democrat but not agree with the Democratic Party, and in this case, they want the GOP that agrees with the current GOP party to continue their efforts with the Western congressional seat that's up for election, which is kind of like a toss-up because we're getting a bunch of new faces, and not to mention Dane's seat when he stepped down to support Alma, so who's going to be running as senator, and then I guess Seth Bodner, who is running as independent. So I don't know. I don't want to get too into politics, but it is inevitable because it's literally the only thing that's going to be contested during our public lands debate and everything going on with that. Not to mention the Montana Plan, which is a big constitutional initiative that many people here in Missoula are definitely for, and even some of the more urban centers, that more they learn about the Montana Plan, the more like, okay, yeah. And like, we can't prevent Citizens United from bringing in dark money, but we can control who donates to where. So that's part of the Montana Plan. So, just think about it like this. And, as we're talking about some history and a lot of different things, Britain and their parliament, their government is going through a major shakeup right now, because now after a 700-year history, the House of Lords is now pretty much defunct, and they've basically been sacked in terms of British terms, and roughly 1 in 10 members are currently hierarchy, people who have blood, lords, and all that kind of stuff. The whole idea of inheriting seats in the Lords has nothing to do with you're voted in. So the House of the Lords was people who were born into rich families. So they inherited seats, which, you have bishops, you have lords, ladies, all that kind of stuff, and they were joined by life peers, retired politicians, civic leaders, and other notable appointees by the government. So think about it in reverse. Think about it in reverse, as they had control and interest in Britain because they had long lines of family-owned property and the country for so long. The Gilded Age was pretty much the transfer of wealth from royals to more established trading organizations. For example, one of the most powerful private entities of the British Empire was the East Indies Trading Company, which was a big proponent of what they did with what would be in creating what would be the future of the Commonwealth. So they'd go to these countries, they would basically invest in these places, they would build crops, they would take as much food from these places, they would have them up their things so they could feed their folks back in Britain. Because, you know, wintertime, famine was pretty common for those folks in the days. But far be it for me to teach history on the matter. It's kind of a big deal since signing of the Magna Carta, which gave Democratic Party to the people and still abiding to the royal order. This one is more or less about being like, let's get rid of this older institution, go stick with the pure parliamentary, and where people can vote to get you in there rather than you just thinking that you're special and you get to be in there just because your daddy was a prime minister of some sorts. But regardless, peasants, notwithstanding name-wise, were given the House of Commons as a means to govern their own country since 1707, and it wasn't until the 1900s where Parliament Acts laid groundwork to prevent the House of Lords from vetoing bills. So they had the veto power back in the day where they could be like, no, you can do all these plans, all this stuff. It's a good idea. We'll add on to it and take all the credit for it. So there's a lot of interesting things like that. But, you know, it's the obsession with, you know, British Empire, because a lot of times I always like to think of America as the kind of branched off of England as being like, hey, you're telling us what to do too much. Let us learn to do our things on our own. And then they just kept pushing us. You know, they could have had a better relationship. Heck, America could have been just as much as partnered with as Canada is with the Commonwealth. But regardless, you know, there's some of the things that are happening. But as from what the article has mentioned on NPR, is that this House of Lords 700-year history will basically end in spring. It's kind of crazy. It's a pretty big event that's happening. Besides, of course, the current Middle East conflict that's going on right now with Iran, and it's constantly going fluid. There's a lot of things going on right there, and just in terms of what's happening there is that, you know, just some of the more recent news is that, you know, Hegseth, the Department of War leader, is talking about how the new Supreme Leader is wounded and likely disfigured. Just, you know, all the bombing campaigns, all this stuff that's happening right now, and we just know that there's bombing happening, and there's just not much footage coming out of the Middle East in general. As yeah, oil prices going up, a lot of things happening with that. But let's kind of take things aside and kind of bring it back to Missoula and talk about some of the events that are happening. So there's a 24-hour math marathon to celebrate Pi Day, which is happening on March 14th, 3.14, to celebrate Pi Day, starting today at 9 a.m. and continues through March 14th at 9 p.m. This big process is big class, and the math department, if you go in the math building, room 103, starting at 9 a.m. this morning. This event is all about celebrating math, pi, and also having some snacks along the way too. So a lot of big events happening within the math department. This is their day. Stroller Strides, Mommy and Me workout classes at the Sports Barn at 10 a.m. Family Fun Time at Missoula Gymnastics at 10 a.m. Tiny Tails at Missoula Public Library at 10:30 this morning. Butterfly release at the Missoula Butterfly House starting at 11 a.m. Lunch service at the Missoula Senior Center, and if you're interested, they also have it at the Paul Varela Center at 11:30. Yarns and Watercolor here at the Missoula Public Library every Friday at noon on the 4th floor. Open Wood Shop at Home Resources is their project that you'd love to create, but you don't have the space, tools, or expertise to help get you going. Here's your answer. Home Resources does these kind of great projects, and project materials can be purchased through their store and their other local shops. Here are some of there's some of the tools that they're available for use after training at the Home Resource Wood Shop. So also Brown Bag and Bones with paleontologist Jason C. Poole at the Montana Natural History Center every Friday at 1 p.m. It looks like it's an ongoing series. Glass Fusing, Freeze and Frit Artist Plate at the Lifelong Learning Center starting at 1 p.m. You do some glass fusings. They do a lot of great programs there as well. Hands-on Science, Crazy's Chemistry at Spectrum Discovery Center at 2 in the afternoon here on the second floor of Missoula Public Library. Youth Adult Writer Group, just in the art box usually, where they help kids get into literature. Predator Feeding is also happening in the Missoula Butterfly House, where you get to see how insects consume their prey. This is happening at 3:30 in the afternoon. Friday, they usually do it pretty often around that time, most days, but you want to look out for it moving forward. Learn computer animation with Blender. This is from 4 to 6 p.m. here at the Missoula Public Library, here on the first floor here at MCAT. Learn computer Blender with Neil, who's teaching a little bit more about 3D modeling and also how to use Blender to utilize animation as well. Power Hour at Big Sky Arcadia in the Southgate Mall at 5 p.m. You got Berkshire Hathaway is doing an artist talk with the Journey of Protection. The Montana Constitution Roadshow is a Big Sky Brewing Company at 5:30 p.m. tonight. And Date Night Pottery Studio is at the Clay Studio of Missoula at 6 p.m. Jack and the Ben Wright local guests at Free Cycles, performing music there starting at 6:30 p.m. San Holo at the Wilma's playing electronic music at 7 p.m. Karaoke at the West Side Lanes. Karaoke at Jack's Saloon at 7 p.m. Jazz Off the Rails at River Ramblers at 7 p.m. Lightning Thief is performing at the MCT. This is a Percy Jackson book. They're doing a musical. It's called The Lightning Thief Percy Jackson Musical at 7:30 p.m. 46th Annual UM Buddy DeFranco Jazz Festival at 7:30 p.m. If you guys get a chance, the Buddy DeFranco Jazz Festival is bringing in jazz clinics from all around the nation to help improve some of the skills of music, and also figuring out ways to kind of go off the page and do some improv, because jazz is the closest thing to improv that any musician will ever get to enjoy outside of sheet music. So Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday at 8 p.m. at the Roxy Theater tonight. If you want to get your Friday the 13th kick, Joan Zen Band is performing at the Union Club at 9 p.m. Badlanders having a Frequency Expedition, drum and bass, techno house, techno music at 10 p.m. And then Saturday, we're going to have all those markets and such happening. The Clark Fork River Market happens at the Badlander and locals only at 9 a.m. to about 1 p.m. And then, of course, the winter market, as always, is at near Shields in the kind of atrium annex area entrance to the Missoula Southgate Mall. Run for the luck of it. So kicking off your St. Patrick's Day events for Saturday is at the fairgrounds. They're doing a 5K starting at 8:45 a.m. We also have family fun time at the Mismo Gymnastics, line dancing at Missoula Aging Services at 10 a.m. Mismo at 9 a.m. Preschool playgroup at Roots Acre Sports Center at 10:15 a.m. Saturday Kids Natural History Center is doing geology at 11 a.m. Fix-It Clinic at Home Resource at 11 a.m. We also have story time at 11:30 a.m. here at the Missoula Public Library. And then St. Patrick's Parade is kicking off at 12 noon, where we step off at 12 noon, and MCAT will be there in attendance. MCAT Saturday drop-ins at 1 p.m. for anybody interested in learning about stop animation, where we take pictures, have it move, take pictures, and then try to come up with a plot. Irish hurling match at Grizz Stadium at 1:30 p.m., continuing the St. Patrick's Day celebration with the Grizz hurling team. We got St. Patrick's Day celebration at the Rhino Bar at 2 p.m. Sunday, Tiny Tales at Missoula Public Library at 3 p.m. Bingo at the Trough at 3 p.m. Irish Banquet at the Holiday Inn in downtown Missoula at 6 p.m. Just Gypsy Jazz at Leaf and Quiet. Speed Dating at 7 p.m. at Sacred Ellie. Rock Lotto at the Wilma at 7 p.m. High Noon Swing Band at the Old Post at 7:30 p.m. Argentinian Tango at the Elks Lodge at 8 p.m. Demon Doll Art and Letting Go album release party at Monk's, doing some rock music there. Karaoke at West Side Lanes at 9 p.m. Owen Ross Band at 9 p.m. at Union Club. Mark Dubois and Crossroads at St. Patrick's Day party at the Sunrise Saloon at 7 p.m. 406 Latin Night is going to be performing at the Dark Horse Bar right next to the Sunrise Saloon at 9 p.m. Chris Moon is going to be at the Badlander at 10 p.m. And then Sunday, you get some meditation after that, starting at 9 a.m. at the Missoula Butterfly House, where they devote 9 to 10 p.m. for butterfly meditation. And then we got Sunday Fun Day at Crankistan Public House. Stitch and Bitch at the Space DIY Studio at noon, and we also got Speed Puzzling at Draftworks at noon. We got Salsa Dance Class at 1 p.m. at Rocky Mountain Ballet Theater. Pottery Beginning Class at the Clay Studio of Missoula at 1 p.m. ARW, this is a AR workshop in Missoula. Ma Zhang is doing this at AR Workshop at 2 p.m. Oscar Watch Party at Missoula Public Library, and Roxy has theirs at 4 p.m. Dram Tough Trivia, the Dram Shop Central at 6 p.m. Western Union, Zach Plays Country at the Zach, and then karaoke at the Sunrise Saloon to wrap up your Sunday night. So without further ado, I wanted to thank you guys for joining me this morning, and for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Ramf. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully it's not going to, the snow is not going to stick around for too long, because it has been a lot warmer for the snow to really stick around, but it is snowing out there, and we'll see how long it lasts into the afternoon.